I wanted to have you on really to talk about your experience talking with these individuals and to really go over how I think um, Protestants really don't understand Latter-day Saint soteriology, and
Hmm.
also to some degree how Latter-day Saints sometimes don't fully understand our own theology about the nature of salvation and exaltation.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
really quick, before we get into any of the videos that you've prepared, can you kind of just give us a brief rundown? What is, when we talk about salvation and exaltation,
Hmm.
because these are two terms that Latter-day Saints use that are sometimes taken out of context or sometimes even conflated in our own discussions. Can you talk about those two terms and what we're really talking about?
Sure. I can define those, and I have a little couple slides I can show you about how once we define the terms, how do those play into our own soteriology or doctrine of salvation? How I would describe the difference between being saved and being exalted is very simple. Well, the word saved, I think it was Elder Oaks who said that there's at least six definitions of the word saved based on its context. But I think there's really two that we could talk about that really make a difference. The first definition of being saved is being saved from physical death, right? So all people who have received a body here on the earth, whether they were the worst of the worst or whether they were Jesus Christ himself, everybody will be saved from physical death. Everybody will be immortal. So in that way, salvation is free, right? Salvation is given to all because even though you're going to die, you will be resurrected. Now, and that applies to people in the telestial kingdom on the bottom, terrestrial in the middle, celestial at the top. Even those in outer darkness, who probably will be but a few, uh, are will be saved. They will have bodies if they had a body here on earth. Now, I think the more important definition of saved, what we mean when we say saved most of the time, is is salvation within the celestial kingdom, which is kind of where Protestants, have their doctrine of heaven, right? Protestants obviously don't accept Doctrine and Covenants 76, which gives the outline of the degrees of glory, even though the different resurrections are mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul's talking about the celestial and the terrestrial bodies in the resurrection. So when we say saved, I think it's most accurately defined as celestial kingdom. Now, Joseph Smith received a revelation, I forget what year, probably near 1840, where it's in Doctrine and Covenants 131, verses 1 through 4. And it says that essentially a person who's willing to receive all that God has for them, and they receive it by receiving his law, right? uh, Even in the temple, right? We talk about temple ordinances. We'll talk about the purpose of the temple ordinances in a second. But a person who's willing to receive all that he has for them can become what we call exalted. They can receive what the scriptures call eternal life. I think it was Bruce R. McConkie. I might have a quote of him saying that when the scriptures use the word saved, what it's actually talking about is exaltation. So when the scriptures say eternal life, right? For example, Moses 139, right? God's purpose is to bring to pass the immortality, which is the first saving, if you will, that we mentioned, and the eternal life of man or mankind. Eternal life would be considered exaltation. In short, exaltation is living not only with God, because you can do that in the first degree of the celestial kingdom. We'd say there's 3 degrees per D&C 131. Not only living with him, but also being like him and doing what he does. Even it was Elder President Nelson in his 2018 or 19 Christmas devotional. He says that when God offers us eternal life, he's essentially saying, if you really want to become like us, then you can preside over kingdoms and worlds as we do. So, in other words, our post mortal theology is much more robust than simply heaven and hell, right? And that comes from a rejection of sola scriptura. God has more to teach us. I think if I only believed in the Bible alone, I think I might also come to the conclusion that there's only a heaven or a hell. So I hope that makes sense of salvation in a couple senses, but exaltation is really the goal, right, that God's pushing us towards. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, and I would just add to that a little bit here with the difference between physical death and spiritual death. We are
Yeah.
saved from both through the grace of Christ, through his atonement. And so when we talk about spiritual death, we're talking about separation from God.
Mhm.
And if we are saved from spiritual death, then we are reunited with God. There is no separation. And so you can't really have a separation uh, from God and still be spiritually saved. And so when we talk about exaltation in the church, we use this term really to mean a reconciliation with God and our reuniting with Him in His presence.